Hello, my name is Tony Suttle. I'm a member of the Guides and Artists panel of the Dublin City Gallery, the Hugh Lane. And this short talk is part of the gallery's contribution to this year's International Sculpture Day. This gallery, Dublin's Municipal Gallery, was founded in the early 1900s by the Irish-born art collector and dealer, Sir Hugh Lane, with the substantial help of his friends and supporters. It was, at the time of its opening, the only gallery in the world exclusively dedicated to the display of what was termed as modern art. Although Hugh Lane died relatively young in 1917 with the sinking of the Lusitania, the gallery has continued to be guided by both his objectives and approaches to art. Although as a municipal gallery under the wing of Dublin City Council, the gallery has always depended also on the help of friends, supporters and benefactors in terms of both finance and artworks. Among the benefits of this situation is the fact that the gallery has developed an interestingly eclectic mix of works through the years, since the death of its main founder, Hugh Lane. Many of these contributions consist of single works, both from individual donors and from groups such as the Friends of the National Collections, and also larger gifts, such as the Francis Bacon Studio and a significant group of works by the painter Sean Scully. What I will try to show you in this presentation is a small selection from the sculptural works in the collection, as both a cross-section of types of work and of materials, and, I must admit, some of my personal favorites. This work, Suzanne walking in leather skirt, stands on the forecourt in front of the gallery entrance, where once the carriages of Lord Charlemont, the original owner of the gallery building, and his guests would have drawn up. The work is by Julian Opie, one of that talented group of people referred to as the YBAs, or Young British Artists. Many of that group, including Opie, graduated from Goldsmiths College in London, where one of Opie's tutors was the Dublin-born conceptual artist and painter Michael Craig Martin. This example of Opie's work is just one part of a temporary installation of 5 animated LED installations, which in 2008 were sited along the central median of O'Connell Street and on Parnell Square. Excuse me. This element of the 5-part installation still remains on the Hugh Lane forecourt. The installation was curated for the Hugh Lane's centenary celebrations in 2008. Opie blurs the relationship between artist and non-artist within our society. His images are simple in appearance, though amongst the most complex and sophisticated in contemporary art practice. They reveal to us that culture is exciting, is free, and is all around us. He challenges the traditional relationship between art and its consumers, where, inside a gallery, the context alone demands concentration, intimacy, study, and time. Opie's installation of works on Dublin's O'Connell Street allowed everyone access and immediacy without the usual pomp of public art. As a successful artist who exhibits internationally, Opie uses computers in art to present items of everyday life. His style was brought to a wider audience as part of the stage sets for U2 and their Vertigo World Tour of 2005. As in this example, Opie has based most of his work on portraits and animated walking figures using a very simplified, minimal line drawing approach. He has worked in a wide variety of media. Here, he is using LED lighting, more often applied to road work warnings and similar emergency signage. And Opie's themes have been described as engagement with art history, use of new technology, obsession with the human body, and work with one idea across different media. Now, those of you who have met me perhaps on either tours or talks in the gallery will know that from time to time I sort of come away from my pre-recorded or pre-written script, which is what I'm using here, and go off on a tangent for a moment. So forgive me if I do that, even if I lose my train of thought for a moment or two. But so suddenly occurred to me as I sit here recording this at home for later watching by you on your computer screens, that I'm really noticing significantly what we're missing by not doing all of this in real time, in real life. Because as I look at this work, we're looking at a photograph. And one of the key elements of Opie's work is, of course, that it's animated. Suzanne is walking in her leather skirt. And what it brings home to me again, what we're all really missing is the immediacy of the works in front of us, and no more so than with Julian Opie's work. This we really need to see in the flesh, so to speak. Suzanne is really walking, and Opie brings to her a sort of certain delightful sensuality of a real young woman, and he carefully titles it Walking in Leather Skirt. He's drawing attention to the fact that she's walking and she's in a leather skirt and she looks delightful. And this is what we're missing by this virtual reality. So just imagine for yourselves what it will be like when we're back in the gallery again and can really meet Suzanne and enjoy her walking in front of us. In fact, sadly, I've not been near the gallery or in the center of the city for almost a year, and I'm not even sure if Suzanne has been turned off for the duration. Let's hope not, so that the few casual passers-by that there might be there, they at least can enjoy what we're not enjoying. What we're missing is Suzanne walking. However, let me continue with what I was saying earlier. I said, behind Opie's Suzanne, you can see the entrance to the gallery, which, as I said, hopefully before long, we will all be able once again to visit the gallery and see all its works directly. But on your next visit, as you stand on the steps before entering, look behind you across the road to the Garden of Remembrance. There, above the trees, you will see a large sculpture, The Children of Lear, by Irish artist Oisin Kelly. The Children of Lear is one of the many fine public sculptures around the city, and Dublin City Council is currently undertaking a programme to commission some further sculptural pieces to add to the city's collection. Now we have come into the gallery building itself, where we meet this work titled After Image by Irish sculptor Michael Warren. The last time I was in the gallery, as I said now over a year ago, it stood in the entrance hall and was a great point at which to start enjoying the gallery's range of works. And I will add, it is one of my favorite works in the gallery. As you can see, it is a large piece. It's a large piece, over 2 meters at its tallest, made in Irish oak, and it consists of 2 freestanding components, one vertical, one horizontal. I suggest that, as with almost all of Warren's work, this piece conveys a strong sense of its own presence, assertively sharing the viewer's space. For me, it works by balancing opposites, lightness and weight, equilibrium and imbalance, ground level and height. It was shown first at the Rosk exhibition in Dublin in 1984. I suggest that in Warren's work, an artisan's love of material and technique is combined with a keen comprehension of Western philosophy. Warren was elected as a member of ASTON in 1981 and as a member of the Royal Hibernian Academy in 2008. And he has created some of the most challenging public sculptures of the last decades. Now, in normal times, I bring groups of school children around the gallery, and I particularly enjoy those aged about 7 or 8 years old, just when their self-confidence and awareness of the world around them is beginning to grow. With this work, I suggest that those who want to should lie on the ground, perhaps leaning on one elbow, looking up, and others might like to stand as tall as they can, arms in the air, and others, again, might prefer just to stand and look. Then I ask each group how they feel, what they think about their position, and to share their perceptions. And I always come away having learned something new about Michael Warren's afterimage. Born in Ireland in 1950, Michael Warren lives and works in County Wexford. He was educated at Trinity College and studied also at the Academy of Fine Arts in Milan. He works in a wide range of materials, notably wood, stone, steel, and concrete, and in a wide range of scales, from large public pieces to smaller domestic works. He has had a large number of site-specific works commissioned internationally and in various locations in Ireland. And Dublin is fortunate in having a number of his works in public spaces, including the grounds of IMA, the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and in front of the municipal offices at Wood Quay, and in the grounds of both Trinity College and of UCD at Belfield, where there is a larger version of this work, afterimage. So, how do you yourself find Warren's afterimage? Does it work for you? Is it too abstract? Do you feel affectionate towards it, or perhaps threatened? Or again, perhaps just baffled? Come and visit it again when the gallery reopens. And maybe, if the gallery is not too crowded, you might even consider lying on the floor to one side so nobody trips over you, and try looking at it from a child's perspective, where everything looks taller and higher. Now, this is a bust portrait of Lady Gregory by the American-born sculptor Jacob Epstein. The bust was commissioned by Hugh Lane, who was Lady Gregory's nephew. Lady Gregory was a significant figure in the cultural Celtic revival movements in the early 1900s, a co-founder of the Abbey Theatre, and a strong supporter of Hugh Lane's efforts to create this gallery. Apparently, neither Hugh Lane nor Lady Gregory herself were initially pleased with Epstein's depiction of her. However, I understand that she later came to appreciate the work's energy, which can be seen as a particular characteristic of Epstein's portraiture. To my eyes, I feel Epstein has captured the essence of a woman who, I suspect, had all of the strength of character one can see in this portrait. Epstein was born in New York to a middle-class Jewish family in 1902. In 1902, he moved to Paris, where he studied at the Académie Julian and the École des Beaux-Arts. He then moved to London, married, and became a British subject in 1911. In Britain, he belonged to the Vorticist group of modernist artists and writers in the early 1900s, and had a long and successful career with a mixture of public commissions and many portrait works. He helped pioneer modern sculpture and often produced controversial works which challenged ideas of what was appropriate subject matter for public artworks. One of his better known works is the large memorial tomb for Oscar Wilde at the Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Here, I feel Epstein has left us a powerful image of one of the key figures in the establishment of this gallery. Now, this work is by the British artist Henry Moore. Moore was born in Yorkshire, the son of a coal miner. He studied initially at Leeds and then at the Royal College of Art in London, where he later taught, as he did indeed also at the Chelsea College of Art. During World War II, he was an official war artist, producing the famous series of drawings of people in underground air raid shelters during the Blitz. Those figures continued to inform many of Moore's subsequent treatments of the reclining human form. In 1948, his international career took off after he won the International Sculpture Prize at the Venice Biennale. Moore is seen as one of the most original and powerful modern sculptors. He produced much of his considerable output as figures and groups in a semi-abstract style. Much of his work is based on organic forms and the undulating rhythms found in landscape and natural rock. He was influenced also by early African and Mexican art. While this work tends towards abstraction, the piece is still largely representational, more so, for example, than the work by Michael Warren, at which we have just looked. We can see that this is a human form, the relative absence of surface detail suggesting a foetal, but also androgynous adult. We are uncertain if it is a male or a female person. The angularity of the form's composition lends energy, but there is also a certain sensuality in the pose and in the smoothing of the surface. This combination of varying and almost conflicting elements is typical of Moore's work. As with the Michael Warren work, Moore's figure is both recumbent, almost tied to the ground, and at the same time attempting to rise. It is simultaneously angular and curved, smooth and rough. Discussing this work with young people, I sometimes suggest that they not look at it as a human form, but rather as a landscape of curving hilltops, valleys, and rock faces. So again, I ask, how do you find it for yourself? Does it work for you? If the gallery were to lend it to you, not regrettably a probability, would you like to live with it for a while and share your domestic space with it for some time? Or is it an object that you would prefer to visit occasionally at the gallery? I suggest that the figure is unique to itself, in its own space, both emotionally and materially, and at the same time, universal. And Dublin is lucky in that, in addition to this relatively small work by Moore at this gallery, there are also two more public works in the city by Henry Moore, one in the grounds of Trinity College on a lawn in behind the Campanile, and one in St. Stephen's Green, where it is part of a memorial garden for the poet W.B. Yeats. It's near the pedestrian entrance to Stephen's Green, across the road from the College of Surgeons. Here we are looking at two smallish works by two British sculptors, Michaelerton on the left and Elizabeth Frink on the right, each of whom were active in the mid to later years of the last century, my teenage years. Each of them died relatively young, and both were influenced in their development by Henry Moore, amongst others. Although Ayrton and Frink are now somewhat forgotten, for me, they remind me what it was like to be a human being in the mid-20th century. The piece on the left by Ayrton is a small tabletop sculpture, about 33 centimeters or a foot high. It was acquired by this gallery in 1977, just 2 years after Ayrton's death, and is a good example of his late sculptural work on the theme of the Minotaur, a topic on which he had worked in a variety of ways throughout his later career. It consists of two opposing figures, one a human male, the other a minotaur, half man, half bull. The two figures separated by a semi-opaque plexiglass barrier that divides the space in which they each stand. It was part of what he called his Reflector series, which embodied the double concept that man struggles inside the half-protective, half-restrictive maze of his or her circumstances. Michaelerton was multi-talented, both as an artist and writer, renowned as a painter, printmaker, sculptor, and designer, and also as a critic, broadcaster, and novelist. His varied output of sculptures, illustrations, poems, and stories reveal an obsession with flight, myth, mirrors, and mazes. He was also a stage and costume designer, producing at the age of 19 costume and set design for a 1942 John Gielgud production of Macbeth. Now somewhat forgotten in the middle years of the last century, notably in the post-war years of the 1950s, Ayrton was a well-known public figure in British art and cultural life generally. As a painter, Ayrton was first associated with the English neo-romantic movement, influenced by artists such as Graham Sutherland and John Piper, and by the sculptor Henry Moore. In the earlier part of his career, Ayrton focused mainly on the graphic arts, painting and book and other illustration work. Then, with the encouragement of Henry Moore, he turned increasingly to sculpture. I suggest that Ayrton's allegorical depiction of the Minotaur, human with both spiritual and animal elements in his nature, trapped in an inescapable maze, reflects many elements of all of our existences. The work on the right is Elizabeth Frink's Warrior Cop, made in 1957, in the earlier part of her relatively short but productive working life, and in the early days of her first marriage to Michel Jamais, an architect and a son of the Jamais who ran the well-known restaurant in Dublin for many years in the mid-1900s. Early in her career, Frink studied at the Chelsea College of Art, where one of her tutors was the North of Ireland-born sculptor F.E. McWilliam. And in fact, as an aside, this gallery has one of F.E. McWilliam's small but powerful statues of the women of Belfast in its collection. Again, something to come back and look at when it's on display. Now, Elizabeth Frink, to return to Elizabeth Frink, her career was successful from the start. She was one of a group of strong British sculptors working at this time, including, of course, Henry Moore, but also sculptors such as Reg Butler and Edoardo Paolozzi. And Frink was also particularly interested in the work of the Swiss-born sculptor Giacometti. In addition to her sculpture, Frink also produced both book illustrations and prints, but is best known for her bronze outdoor works. These tend to be life-scale or slightly larger in size and with a distinctive cut, worked surface. Her subject matter tended to focus on animals, notably horses and birds, and on the human male. Throughout her career, in both her graphic work and in her sculpture, Frink drew on archetypes, expressing masculine strength, struggle, aggression, and frailty. At one point, she commented that she focused on the male because, to me, he is a subtle combination of sensuality and strength with vulnerability. Warrior Cock is about 1 meter or a yard high, with the rough working of the outer surface giving it what I would describe as a somewhat ruffled or even scrawny look. Like much of Frink's work of animals and of male figures, I feel there is some ambiguity in her presentation, a mix of bravado, of male courage or machismo, and of vulnerability and uncertainty. Throughout her career, Frink focused on the male figure, whether animal, human, or mythical, both as aggressor and as victim, but usually with ambiguity, with often apparent sympathy for the aggressor as well as for the victim. Late in her career, Frink produced a series of male heads, referred to as tribute heads, one of which can be found in Dublin's Merrion Square, dedicated to Amnesty International. This two-part, and oddly named, horse-mirrored sheep boys, cow girls, bronze work of horse-like figures is by the Welsh-born artist Barry Flanagan. Now, throughout his life, Flanagan was itinerant by nature and lived and worked in many locations, including for a period in Dublin. Flanagan's career as an artist can be looked at as two periods, with, however, a strong continuous thread through both. His earlier work was very much in the minimalist, abstract or conceptual form of the 1960s and 70s. And this then appeared to change radically with his first cast bronze Leaping Hare in 1979. Flanagan started by studying architecture, but dropped out to take up a range of activities, including attending part-time classes with the British sculptor Anthony Caro, who in turn had worked with Henry Moore, and moving on to St. Martin's Art School in London. Caro, as with Moore, had worked in a modernist continuation of the long tradition of sculpture, generally using conventional materials of stone, wood, bronze, and steel. Flanagan and his contemporaries preferred to work in a more minimalist manner, using unconventional materials and breaking away from the commercial gallery-led aesthetic. At the time, minimalists were making work from found, often scrap materials, following the largely Italian arte povera movement, and the land artists, who often made temporary works, sometimes based on materials found on long walks in the countryside. Then, in 1979, Flanagan began the series of sculptures of large hares, for which he is best known today. It's interesting that this work we are discussing here, not featuring hares, was made in 1995 and comes about midway through this later stage of his development. His hares can be described as anthropomorphic, that is, attributing human characteristics or personality to animals or other forms of existence. He uses his hares and the other animals in his menagerie of characters, such as these horses, to comment, as much of art does, on the human condition and the universe at large. So, what can we make of these two figures? He made them about midway through the second part of his career, when he had been making and casting hares and other animals for about 20 years. For a conventional horse, they are smaller than life size. Each of the two figures is on a small plinth, bringing them almost to an average human height. As with most sculptures, they occupy their own space. And when we encounter them, we cannot ignore them, as we have to negotiate our passage around them and acknowledge their existence, however briefly. Unlike his hares, they do not have particularly noticeable human characteristics, or do they? They don't appear to be strongly gendered. Now, at this point, I'm going to go off script for a few moments and talk about some of my experiences with these two pieces, because as you see, they are both freestanding. And at the moment, they are turned, each with their heads facing or turned in towards each other. Now, obviously, pieces like this move from time to time around the gallery. And I find that sometimes they are facing inwards and sometimes they are facing outwards. And I'm not too sure whether this is just accident, but I must say I am tempted, and do sometimes when talking to young people, to tell them that when the gallery is closed in the evening, all the works of art come to life. Now, the pictures can't walk around, they just talk to each other, sometimes shouting across the gallery. But the sculptures, of course, can, and that I tell them that these two figures gallop quietly around the gallery. But then suddenly the doors in the morning open and everything has to freeze back, so none of us know that they live at night. So I tell the children that sometimes these horses are caught unawares, and therefore sometimes, and they should look out for this when they come into the gallery on different occasions, they will find the two horses looking inwards, talking to each other, and sometimes they will find them facing outwards as if they've had a tiff. I don't know if any of the children believe a word of this. Now, in addition to this double piece, Dublin has two other large public Flanagan sculptures. One is the drummer, which stands at the entrance door to IMA, the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and the other is called Nijinsky, is at what was previously the AIB head office buildings on Bath Avenue in Sandymount, but currently, I think, in storage as the buildings are being redeveloped. And many of you may also remember the large public exhibition of Flanagan's hares, organized by this gallery, which ran down to the center of O'Connell Street in 2006. Now, I will end with this interesting and challenging work, Shark Lady in a Ball Dress, by Cork-born artist Dorothy Cross. Cross uses a wide range of materials in exploring her long-established interest in issues such as gender, sexuality, authority, and eroticism. She seeks to challenge traditionally accepted stereotypes and the conventions associated with them. Here, Shark Lady in a Ball Dress confronts us with apparent contradictions. The shark is a long-standing symbol in human society. Sharks are seen to signify threat, aggression, and fear. They are commonly seen as male. Here, however, the aggressor turns out to be a female and protrudes from an apparently delicate ball gown of woven bronze. She, however, can also be seen as ambiguously phallic, where her breasts can also be interpreted as testicles. Perhaps in her metallic ball gown, she is dressed to kill. I suggest that the work can be seen as both grotesque and endearing, repellent and also amusing. It challenges our traditional assumptions of aggression and dominance as exclusively male characteristics, with the balancing assumptions of female docility and females as passive objects of desire. Although we are not allowed touch works such as this in a gallery, any gallery, to do so reinforces Cross's ideas, as one's fingertips are repelled by the harsh, scratchy surface of the metallic bronze mesh. So, having looked at my small selection of sculptural works from the Hugh Lane Gallery collection, what do you think? And one question I often ask myself as I walk around the gallery, looking at some of its more recent acquisitions, is what would Hugh Lane have to say about it? Hugh Lane commissioned Lady Gregory's portrait from Epstein, by Epstein, and didn't initially like it, but did change his view over time. Would Lane feel that LED lighting is an appropriate material for making art with a capital A? And what would he think about Dorothy Cross's view of the female in the world in the mid-20th century? That is one of the wonders of any good gallery or museum. Its contents can perhaps give you answers or insights to your view of the world, and it can raise questions about your view of the world. So, on that note, I will end. Thank you for joining me, and as we all look forward, once again, hopefully soon, to visiting the Dublin City Gallery, the Hugh Lane. So, for now, goodbye.